This policy, Rogers would later admit, was one of the hardest orders he ever had to follow, knowing what was happening to American PS in Japanese camps. The Japanese PSWs were assigned to Compound 3, separated from the Germans and Italians by double fences, topped with barbed wire. Each barrack housed 50 men in individual bunks with mattresses, sheets, and blankets. Luxury beyond imagination for soldiers who had slept on cave floors in the Pacific. The buildings had electric lights, hot water, flush toilets, and central heating that kept them warm through Wisconsin's brutal winters. The camp hospital particularly astounded Japanese medical personnel among the prisoners. Unlike the desperate shortages they had experienced in combat zones, Camp McCoy's medical facilities included X-ray machines, surgical equipment, and adequate supplies of medications, including the new wonder drug, penicillin. Nothing challenged Japanese military indoctrination more directly than the camp meals. 3 times daily, Japanese PSWs were served portions that exceeded what Japanese civilians had seen since 1940. The daily ration of 2,800 calories matched what American soldiers received, including meat, vegetables, bread, butter, coffee, and occasional desserts. The Japanese compound was even provided with rice and soy sauce after the camp administration learned about Japanese dietary preferences. This accommodation, enemies adjusting meals for prisoner comfort, created psychological crisis among the PSWs. In the Japanese military, soldiers regularly starved. Here, prisoners were asked about food preferences. The camp kitchen became a source of particular amazement. Japanese PS assigned to cooking duties discovered electric mixers, industrial refrigerators, and gas stoves that could prepare meals for thousands. The technology was decades ahead of anything in Japan. More disturbing was the waste. Food discarded daily because regulations required preparing extra portions to ensure adequate supplies. One of the most profound challenges to Japanese military ideology came from an unexpected source, the camp chapel. Japanese PS were not only permitted but encouraged to practice their religious beliefs. A Buddhist shrine was established complete with incense provided by the Young Men's Christian Association, YMCA. American Christians supplying materials for Buddhist worship of enemy soldiers. The Japanese PSWs were allowed to hold daily services, celebrate Buddhist holidays, and even conduct funeral rites for the few prisoners who died of illness or injury. This respect for enemy religious practices contradicted everything they had been told about American cultural barbarism. Even more shocking was the presence of Japanese American soldiers serving as interpreters and guards. These Nisei soldiers, many from the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and Military Intelligence Service, were Americans of Japanese descent whose own families were imprisoned in internment camps, yet who served their country with distinction. By summer 1944, labor shortages in American agriculture led to Japanese PSWs working on farms across Wisconsin, Michigan, and Iowa. Unlike the slave labor Japanese forces extracted from Allied PWs building the Burma Railway, where 12,000 Allied prisoners died, American authorities paid Japanese PS for their labor the same rate as German and Italian prisoners. The work details revealed American agricultural abundance that defied Japanese comprehension. Single farms in Wisconsin produced more food than entire Japanese prefectures. Mechanical harvesters, electric milking machines, automated feed systems, technology that made one American farmer as productive as dozens of Japanese peasants. The relationship between Japanese prisoners of war and American farmers evolved from mutual suspicion to surprising cordiality. Many farmers had sons fighting in the Pacific. Yet they treated Japanese prisoners with basic human decency, sharing lunch, teaching farming techniques, sometimes inviting them for dinner despite regulations against fraternization. By late 1944, Camp McCoy had established educational programs for PSWs. Japanese prisoners could study English, American history, mathematics, and basic sciences. The camp library, stocked with books in multiple languages, including Japanese, became a refuge for intellectually starved soldiers who had been forbidden to read anything but military manuals for years. The camp offered various vocational training programs, and some Japanese PWs took English classes that would later prove invaluable in post-war Japan. The availability of American newspapers and magazines, even with wartime censorship, provided a window into democratic society that contradicted years of totalitarian propaganda. Christmas 1944. At Camp McCoy produced a psychological crisis among Japanese PSWs that challenged their worldview. American church groups, civic organizations, and individual families sent Christmas packages to the camp, including gifts for Japanese PS who followed Buddhism or Shintoism and didn't celebrate Christmas. Each Japanese prisoner received packages containing cigarettes, candy, toiletries, warm socks, and hand-knitted scarves. The gifts came with cards, many clearly written by children, expressing hope for peace and the prisoners' safe return to their families. The Christmas dinner defied comprehension. Turkey, ham, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, pies, quantities of food that Japan hadn't seen since before the First World War. The Japanese PS were invited to attend Christmas services in the chapel, though few did. Those who attended out of curiosity heard prayers for peace for all soldiers' safe return home, including enemies. The presence of German PWs in adjacent compounds provided Japanese prisoners with another perspective challenging comparison. The Germans moved freely within their compounds, organized sports leagues, performed theatrical productions, published camp newspapers, and generally treated captivity as an inconvenience rather than a source of shame. The contrast was stark. While Japanese PSWs initially refused to give their names, providing only serial numbers, Germans chatted freely with guards, wrote letters home, and made plans for post-war life. The Germans' casual acceptance of peace status without apparent shame or suicidal ideation gradually influenced Japanese prisoners. Inter-compound sports competitions, carefully supervised, brought Japanese PWS into contact with German and Italian prisoners. These interactions demonstrated that peace status was considered normal in Western military culture, not the ultimate dishonor Japanese military ideology proclaimed. Perhaps no single factor challenged Japanese military indoctrination more than male Japanese POWs were encouraged to write home through the International Red Cross, though most initially refused, believing their families thought them dead, the only honorable fate for a captured soldier. The camp administration's persistence in explaining male rights gradually wore down resistance. When the first Japanese PS began receiving replies from their families in early 1945, the psychological impact rippled through the entire compound. Families expressed joy at their survival, not shame at their capture. Soon, dozens of Japanese PS were writing home. The American censors, who had to approve all letters, were remarkably lenient, allowing prisoners to describe camp conditions, their health, their daily activities. This transparency, enemies allowing honest communication about treatment, contradicted Japanese assumptions about American deception. In April 1945, as American forces invaded Okinawa, Japanese PS at Camp McCoy learned of the battle through American newspapers available in the library. The coverage detailed, including American casualties and setbacks, demonstrated a press freedom incomprehensible in totalitarian Japan, where only victories were reported. More shocking were reports of American efforts to protect Okinawan civilians. While Japanese military propaganda claimed Americans would rape and murder all civilians, newspaper accounts described Marine units risking casualties to evacuate civilians from combat zones, military doctors treating wounded Japanese civilians, and engineers providing clean water to refugee camps. When Okinawan civilians began arriving at mainland camps after being captured, their testimonies contradicted Japanese military claims that Americans would commit genocide against Japanese populations. These first-hand accounts from fellow Japanese further eroded military indoctrination. August 6, 1945. The atomic bombing of Hiroshima was reported immediately in American newspapers available to PS. The Japanese prisoners' first reaction was disbelief. No single bomb could destroy an entire city. When Nagasaki followed 3 days later, the reality became undeniable. The psychological impact was complex. Horror at the destruction mixed with awe at American technological superiority and surprisingly relief that the war would end without the anticipated invasion of Japan that would have killed millions. Most profound was the American reaction, not celebration, but sobering reflection on what they had unleashed. Camp authorities held special services after the atomic bombings, with chaplain praying for the victims and expressing hope that such weapons would never be used again. This enemy mourning for enemy dead shattered final remnants of propaganda about American barbarism. August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast reached Camp McCoy through translations in American newspapers. For Japanese PS who had been captured, believing the war would continue until every Japanese was dead, the surrender created existential crisis. The American reaction astounded them further. No bloating, no abuse of suddenly defenseless prisoners, no reduction in food or privileges. If anything, camp authorities seemed more concerned about prisoner welfare, instituting suicide watches and providing additional counseling. Colonel Rogers addressed the Japanese compounds personally with Nisei interpreters. The war is over. You will go home when transportation is arranged. Until then, you remain under our protection. Any guard who mistreats you will be court-martialed. You came here as enemies. You will leave as future friends. Fall 1945 brought unexpected challenges. Many Japanese PS, particularly those captured early in the war, feared returning to Japan. They had been transformed by their experience, educated in different ways of thinking, and knew they would return to a destroyed nation that might reject them as contaminated by survival. The camp administration instituted repatriation preparation programs. Japanese PSWs received vocational training in skills needed for reconstruction, construction, electrical work, modern agriculture, basic medical training. The American military, having defeated Japan, was now training Japanese prisoners to rebuild it. Japanese POWs were given surplus clothing, shoes, and basic supplies for their return journey. Each received money for their journey home, funds from the nation that had defeated them to help them start new lives. The journey home began in December 1945. Japanese PS were transported by train to West Coast ports, then by ship to Japan. The cross-country train journey became their farewell to American abundance. Cities rebuilding from war production to consumer goods. Farms preparing for peaceful harvests. Families reuniting with returning soldiers. At San Francisco, Japanese PWS boarded ships for Japan alongside American occupation troops heading to the same destination. The surreal nature of former enemies traveling together to rebuild Japan from opposite perspectives, occupiers and returnees, created unique shipboard dynamics. The Pacific crossing took 2 weeks. Japanese PSWs spent the time preparing for return to a homeland they knew was destroyed. Many wrote letters to American friends, farmers they'd worked for, teachers who'd educated them, even guards who'd shown kindness. These letters preserved in various archives reveal profound psychological Changes. Arriving at Yokohama in January 1946, Japanese PSWs encountered a homeland more devastated than their worst fears. Cities were ash, populations were starving, and American occupation forces controlled everything. The returning PS, healthy and well-fed from American camps, stood out starkly against the skeletal survivors of the Japanese homeland. The reception was mixed. Some families welcomed survivors with joy, others with shame. Military authorities, even in defeat, often treated returned PWs as contaminations. Several reported being told to commit suicide to cleanse their dishonor. But American occupation authorities, recognizing the value of PSWs who understood American culture, often employed them as interpreters and advisors. Many returned PWS found themselves serving as cultural bridges during the occupation. Their English skills, understanding of American customs, and lack of militant hostility made them valuable to both occupation forces and Japanese communities trying to navigate defeat and reconstruction. Returned PWS became unexpected agents of Japanese democratization and modernization. Their exposure to American agricultural techniques, industrial methods, and democratic principles positioned them as valuable resources for reconstruction. Many rose to prominence in post-war Japan precisely because they understood the occupier's mindset and methods. Kazuo Sakamaki, the first P, exemplified this trajectory. After returning to Japan, he joined Toyota Motor Corporation, using his English skills and American understanding to help build Japan's automotive export industry. By 1969, he had become president of Toyota's Brazilian subsidiary, a career impossible without his P experience. He retired in 1987 and lived until 1999, rarely speaking about the war until a 1991 conference where he was reunited with his submarine, now displayed in a Texas museum. Former PWs introduced American farming techniques that revolutionized Japanese agriculture. Others established businesses using American models, taught English and Western customs, advised government ministries on democratic reforms, and testified that Americans were not the demons of wartime propaganda, but potential partners in peace. The educational opportunities Japanese PWS experienced in American camps influenced Japan's post-war education revolution. Former prisoners who had studied in camp libraries understood education's role in democracy and economic development. The camp experience of reading in censored newspapers influenced Japan's post-war press freedom. Several former PSWs became journalists in occupied Japan, advocating for the transparency they'd witnessed in American media available to prisoners. The exposure to different ways of thinking and organizing society helped former PS contribute to Japan's remarkable post-war transformation from militaristic empire to democratic nation. Their experiences bridged the gap between defeat and reconstruction. The most profound impact of the American P experience was moral rather than material. Japanese soldiers taught that mercy was weakness, discovered that American strength came partially from moral confidence. The ability to treat enemies humanely without fearing it would undermine victory. This moral dimension emerged repeatedly in post-war accounts. Former PWs struggled to articulate how American kindness had been more devastating to their worldview than cruelty would have been. Cruelty would have confirmed propaganda. Kindness destroyed it entirely. The treatment contrast with Japanese handling of Allied PWs created particular anguish. As details emerged about Baton, the Burma Railway, and systematic prisoner abuse, former Japanese PS who had experienced American humanity struggled with national shame and personal transformation. One unexpected aspect of camp life that influenced returned PWs was observing American women's wartime roles. Female. Nurses, administrators, and support staff at camps demonstrated women's capabilities beyond Japanese social restrictions. Some prisoners of war worked on farms where women operated machinery and managed operations while men fought overseas. This exposure to different gender roles influenced some returned POWs' views on women's place in society. Having observed that American productivity partially stemmed from utilizing the entire population's capabilities, regardless of gender, they brought these observations back to a Japan that would undergo its own gender revolution in subsequent decades. Beyond agricultural and industrial techniques, Japanese PS absorbed American organizational methods and systematic approaches to problems. The camp experience demonstrated that American efficiency came not from individual superiority, but from systems and procedures that could be learned and adapted. The American approach to mechanical maintenance particularly impressed Japanese PWS accustomed to equipment being used until destruction. Camp vehicles and machinery received regular preventive maintenance, oil changes, parts replacement before failure, systematic inspection schedules. These observations influenced Japanese industrial practices in the post-war period. The religious freedom in American camps influenced Japan's post-war religious landscape. Buddhist PS who had practiced freely in camps returned supporting religious tolerance and separation of religion from state power. Radical concepts in state Shinto. Japan. The Christmas kindness from American Christians particularly influenced returned P's views on Christianity. While few converted, many developed respect for Christian charity they'd experienced firsthand. This helped ease tensions during occupation. When American missionaries arrived in Japan, letters from home that Japanese PWS received in camps revealed family attitudes that contradicted military propaganda about shameful surrender. Wives expressing joy at survival. Parents preferring living sons to dead heroes. Children wanting fathers regardless of military honor. These communications revolutionized PW's understanding of family versus state loyalty. Returned PWS often prioritized family over career, unusual in Japanese corporate culture. Their American experience had shown them that family men could be successful. American farmers and guards spoke constantly of families, displayed photos, planned for post-war reunions. This family focus wasn't weakness but strength. American military psychologists studied Japanese PS extensively. Research that influenced post-war occupation policies. These studies revealed systematic psychological changes among Japanese prisoners exposed to humane treatment and different ways of thinking. The research showed that Japanese PS arrived with death before dishonor conditioning so intense many required suicide prevention for months. Yet prolonged exposure to humane treatment, educational opportunities, and different perspectives produced remarkable changes in worldview. These studies influenced occupation education reforms, land redistribution, and democratic constitution implementation. MacArthur's staff included former camp administrators who understood Japanese psychology through POW observation. This knowledge helped avoid occupation mistakes that might have triggered resistance. Several of Japan's post-war business innovations traced to P observations of American methods. The famous Toyota production system incorporated efficiency concepts that Kazuo Sakamaki and other Toyota employees learned during captivity. Waste reduction, continuous improvement, worker respect. The convenience store concept that revolutionized Japanese retail originated partly from observations of American camp exchanges, small stores, providing diverse goods efficiently. These American models, first seen in captivity, influenced Japanese business development. Returned PSWs became crucial cultural interpreters during occupation and beyond. Their unique experience, seeing America from inside, while maintaining Japanese identity, made them valuable for both societies navigating from enmity to alliance. These cultural bridges extended beyond official channels. Some returned PSWs maintained correspondence with American camp staff, farmers, and families who had shown kindness. These personal connections documented in various archives reveal grassroots reconciliation preceding official alliance. Returned PS faced unique challenges regarding veteran status. Japanese military authorities often denied them benefits, considering surrender dishonorable regardless of circumstances. This discrimination continued for decades, with PSWs excluded from veteran organizations and commemorations. The irony was bitter. Men who had gained valuable experience and connections that helped rebuild Japan were officially dishonored for surviving. Only in the 1970s did Japanese P associations form, advocating for recognition and sharing suppressed experiences. These associations eventually gained recognition, particularly after Emperor Hirohito's death in 1989 removed imperial-era stigma. Former PWS began speaking publicly about their experiences, contributing to Japanese understanding of wartime history and American relations. Children of returned PWS often exhibited unusual characteristics in conformist Japanese society, questioning authority, valuing individual expression, pursuing international careers. These second-generation effects suggested deep psychological changes in returned prisoners that influenced family dynamics. Grandchildren of prisoners of war showed even stronger international orientation. Many studied abroad, particularly in America, drawn by family stories of unexpected kindness from former enemies. These educational exchanges rooted in P experiences strengthened Japanese-American relations across generations. Post-war Japanese academics studied the P experience as a unique window into American society and Japanese psychology. Research revealed consistent patterns. Initial death wish, gradual acceptance of survival, hunger for education, worldview changes, and return anxiety. This research influenced Japanese military education reform, eliminating death before dishonor indoctrination and incorporating Geneva Convention training. Understanding how military indoctrination could be overcome through humane treatment provided insights into human psychology and social transformation. American scholars also studied Japanese P experiences, recognizing their unique value for understanding psychological indoctrination and transformation. These studies contributed to broader understanding of how deeply held beliefs could be changed through experience rather than argument. The 50th anniversary of World War II's end in 1995 brought renewed attention to P experiences. Joint Japanese-American commemorations included former P testimonies about unexpected American kindness that helped transform enemies into allies. These events helped both nations understand their shared history's complexity. Kazuo Sakamaki's 1991 return to America for a historical conference created particular media attention. The first Japanese P meeting his submarine, now a museum display after 50 years, provided powerful visual metaphor for transformation. His emotional reaction, broadcast internationally, humanized historical enemies for new generations. These commemorations helped younger generations understand how former enemies became allies through human connections forged even in captivity. The story of Japanese PWS expecting cruelty but receiving kindness became part of the larger narrative of post-war reconciliation. Today, descendants of Japanese PWS and American camp personnel maintain connections initiated 80 years ago. While most original participants have passed away, their families continue celebrating the transformation from enmity to friendship through various exchanges and commemorations. The Camp McCoy History Center maintains Japanese P archives, including artifacts, letters, and photographs donated by former prisoners and their families. These materials, increasingly digitized for global access, provide researchers worldwide with primary sources about successful enemy rehabilitation, educational exchanges between American and Japanese communities, some rooted in wartime prisoner experiences, continue strengthening bilateral relations. Students learn how enemies became friends through kindness rather than conquest, a lesson with continued relevance. The numbers tell a remarkable story of successful P treatment. Approximately 5,000 Japanese PS held in camps on U.S. mainland. 35,000 to 50,000 total Japanese PS captured by Western allies. Most held in Australia, New Zealand. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Largest U.S. camp, maximum 3,000 Japanese PS. Other camps, Camp Kennedy, Rhode Island. Camp Clarinda, Iowa. Angel Island, California. Daily rations 2,800 calories, same as U.S. soldiers. P wages 80 cents per day for agricultural labor. Mortality rate in U.S. camps extremely low. Comparison 27% mortality rate for Allied PS in Japanese camps. Escape attempts minimal. Most Japanese PS made no attempt to escape. Post-war contact, many maintained correspondence with Americans. The Japanese P experience in America during World War II offers profound lessons about conflict resolution, enemy rehabilitation, and peace-building through humanity rather than vengeance. The success stemmed from principled adherence to international law, even when enemies violated those same laws. Horrifically, this asymmetric morality, treating enemies better than they treated you, proved strategically brilliant. Japanese PWS returned home as inadvertent American ambassadors. Their testimonies about unexpected kindness undermining anti-American propaganda more effectively than any information campaign. The economic benefits also proved substantial. Japan's post-war economic miracle partially stemmed from former PWs introducing American methods and maintaining business connections. Several major Japanese corporations employed former PWs specifically for their American knowledge and connections. But beyond strategic and economic benefits lay moral victory. America proved democracy's superiority through example rather than force. The transformation of Japanese PSWs from fanatic enemies to grateful allies demonstrated that kindness could achieve what violence couldn't. The story of Japanese PS expecting cruel treatment but receiving American kindness stands as testament to democracy's moral power. These men arrived believing death was their only honorable option. They left understanding that life properly lived could honor both personal dignity and international peace. Their transformation from Bushido warriors to democratic citizens proved that enemies need not remain enemies forever. The kindness they experienced as prisoners became seeds of alliance that flowered into one of history's strongest international partnerships. Modern Japan-US relations built on former enmity transformed through humanity demonstrate reconciliation's possibility even after bitter conflict. The camp chaplain who prayed for enemy dead. The farmers who shared lunch with prisoner workers. The families who sent Christmas gifts to enemies. These ordinary Americans demonstrating extraordinary decency achieved what military victory alone couldn't. Genuine transformation of hearts and minds. Today, when international conflicts seem intractable and enemies irredeemable, the Japanese P experience offers hope. It proves that kindness can be stronger than cruelty. That mercy can achieve what force cannot. That today's enemies can become tomorrow's allies if treated with dignity despite past enmity. The Japanese soldiers who expected torture but received kindness, who anticipated death but discovered life, who arrived as enemies but left as friends, remind us that transformation is possible even in humanity's darkest moments. Their journey from attacking Pearl Harbor to rebuilding Japan with American assistance demonstrates that cycles of vengeance can be broken through principled humanity. In the end, America's greatest victory in the Pacific War wasn't just military, but moral. By treating Japanese PSWs with unexpected kindness, America conquered not just Japanese military forces, but also won a deeper victory, proving that democratic values could transform even the most indoctrinated enemies. The roughly 5,000 Japanese prisoners who encountered American humanity on U.S. soil, along with thousands more in Allied camps, carried that experience back to Japan. They became seeds of democracy and friendship in formerly hostile ground. Their accounts of American kindness, preserved in archives and memories, continue teaching that adversaries need not remain adversaries if courage exists to break hatred's cycle through unexpected compassion. This historical episode deserves remembrance not as mere wartime curiosity but as a model for transforming modern conflicts. If Japanese soldiers conditioned for death before dishonor could become democratic citizens through experienced kindness, then today's seemingly intractable opponents might also be transformed through principled humanity. The American guards who protected suicidal prisoners, the doctors who treated enemy wounded, the teachers who educated hostile students, the chaplain who prayed for enemy souls. These ordinary individuals performing extraordinary kindness achieved lasting victory through moral courage. Their example continues inspiring, reminding us that true strength lies not in destroying opponents but in transforming them. The Japanese POWs' journey from expecting torture to encountering kindness, from anticipating death to discovering life, from arriving as enemies to departing as friends, illustrates democracy's deepest strength, the ability to convert adversaries through example rather than force. Their experience proves that mercy can achieve what might cannot, that kindness can prevail where cruelty fails. The story concludes not with conquest but with conversion. Not with submission but with transformation. Not with continued hostility but with enduring friendship. The Japanese soldiers who attacked Pearl Harbor and ended up in American POW camps experienced something more powerful than military defeat. They experienced the transformative power of unexpected kindness that reshaped their understanding of strength, honor, and humanity itself. Their legacy continues in every Japanese-American business partnership, educational exchange, and strategic alliance. The kindness shown to prisoners of war 80 years ago created human bonds that transcended wartime hatred and built bridges between former adversaries that strengthen with each passing generation, proving that humanity's finest qualities can emerge even in war's darkest moments. December 8, 1941. Vim Manalo Beach, Oahu, territory of Hawaii. The sand scorched his face as Inen Kazuo Sakamaki struggled to stay conscious, his fingers clawing desperately at the beach while waves pounded over his exhausted body. In his waterlogged uniform pocket, a small diary contained words that would have ensured his immediate execution if discovered by his own officers: "I have failed the Emperor. I have brought dishonor upon my family. Name for 10,000 generations. Death is my only path to redemption." Through salt-stung eyes, he saw the rifle barrel aimed at his head. An American soldier standing over him in the dawn light. Sakamaki closed his eyes and awaited the bullet that would end his shame. Instead, he heard words that would upend everything he had been taught about the American enemy. "You are safe now. We will get you medical attention." Corporal David Akwai of the 298th Infantry had just captured the first Japanese prisoner of war in American custody, a man who fully expected to be tortured, mutilated, and executed, as Japanese propaganda had warned would be the fate of any soldier foolish enough to surrender to the barbaric Americans. What neither man realized in that moment was that Sakamaki's capture would begin an extraordinary chapter in World War II history, the systematic dismantling of Japanese military indoctrination through unexpected American humanity. Between 1941 and 1945, approximately 5,000 Japanese soldiers would be held in POW camps on American soil, with thousands more held by Allied forces in Australia and New Zealand. The total number of Japanese POWs captured by Western Allied forces during the war reached between 35,000 and 50,000, a remarkably small number considering the scale of the Pacific War. Each one expected cruelty. Each one anticipated torture. Each one prepared for death. Instead, those sent to America would encounter hot showers, 3 meals a day, medical attention, and Geneva Convention protections that left them psychologically stunned, not by brutality, but by kindness. They could neither understand nor initially accept it. The Imperial Japanese military code was absolute: death before dishonor, victory, or destruction. Never surrender. The 1941 military field code distributed to every Japanese soldier contained no instructions for becoming a prisoner of war because such an outcome was considered impossible. A true Japanese warrior would die fighting or commit seppuku rather than allow himself to be captured alive. This was not mere propaganda. It was embedded into the soul of every Japanese serviceman from the moment of enlistment. At the Imperial Naval Academy, where Sakamaki had trained, instructors regularly reminded cadets that their lives belonged to the emperor. Personal survival meant nothing. Honor meant everything. Surrender was not just military failure. It was spiritual contamination that would curse one's ancestors and descendants alike. The contrast with American military culture could not have been starker. While American soldiers were taught the Geneva Convention and their rights as potential POWs, Japanese soldiers were conditioned to believe capture meant torture and death. Japanese military training included graphic depictions of supposed American atrocities, stories of prisoners being skinned alive, subjected to medical experiments, or eaten by cannibalistic Americans. The irony was crushing. While Japanese soldiers were programmed to expect American barbarism, their own military was committing documented atrocities across the Pacific. The Bataan Death March, where 60,000 Filipino and 15,000 American prisoners were forced to march 65 miles in tropical heat without food or water, resulting in thousands of deaths, had occurred just months after Sakamaki's capture. Japanese treatment of Allied POWs would ultimately kill 27% of Western prisoners, compared to just 4% of Allied POWs who died in German and Italian camps. Yet when Sakamaki awoke in a clean hospital bed at San Island, Hawaii, he found American doctors treating his injuries, American nurses delivering him food, and American officers addressing him with military courtesy. The cognitive dissonance was unbearable. He pleaded with his captors to allow him to commit suicide, a request they denied with what seemed to him incomprehensible patience. On March 9, 1942, Sakamaki arrived at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, becoming the first of what would eventually be nearly 3,000 Japanese POWs held at what became the largest Japanese POW camp in the United States. The journey from Hawaii through San Francisco and across the American continent itself became his first lesson in American abundance. Not a cattle car, not a freight wagon, but a passenger train with cushioned seats. Armed guards, yes, but also regular meals served 3 times daily. Through the train windows, he witnessed an America that could not exist according to everything he'd been taught. Cities shone with lights, despite the war. No blackout curtains, no air raid precautions, no visible signs of the total war mobilization that had consumed Japan since 1937. Civilians went about their business as if Pearl Harbor had been a distant inconvenience rather than the devastating strike Japanese propaganda claimed. The American military's decision to house Japanese POWs, primarily at Camp McCoy with smaller numbers at Camp Kennedy in Rhode Island, Camp Clarinda in Iowa, and Angel Island in California, reflected both practical and strategic considerations. These locations were far from the West Coast, where anti-Japanese sentiment ran highest, and in areas where agricultural labor was urgently needed. Camp McCoy sprawled across 60,000 acres of Wisconsin countryside, its vastness alone astonishing to Japanese POWs accustomed to their cramped island nation. Originally built as a training facility, the camp had been hastily converted to accommodate POWs as they began arriving from the Pacific Theater. By 1944, it housed prisoners from multiple nations, Germans, Italians, and Japanese, in separate compounds. The camp's commandant, Colonel Harold Rogers, had received specific instructions from Washington. Japanese PS were to be treated strictly according to the Geneva Convention, regardless of how Japan treated American prisoners.